Today's episode is a sensitive but much needed conversation. Join me as I talk with warriors who are living, loving and thriving. I'm Tomike Adeoye, I'm a Lighthouse Lekki, and this is Real Talk. Hi guys.
Hi.
So to begin with, in a layman's language, what is sickle cell disease?
Where do we begin? How do we begin?
Anywhere that is convenient.
Do you want the biological term or as
okay? You can
my
give us a bit of both.
As a warrior,
we will definitely speak about your experience, but let's start with the biological term. With a bit of your experience.
As simple as it is, it's just when you have sickled red blood cells, meaning your red blood cells, instead of being in a circle shape, is more of a C shape, like a crescent. So it's harder to flow through your blood vessels, and most times it gets clogged in your joints and it causes pain. That's the simplest way.
Okay.
That's the simplest way to explain it.
So what was it like growing up with sickle cell disease?
Wow.
So I think for me, I actually had probably what would be considered like a good upbringing in terms of like growing up with it. I actually didn't know I had it for a long time.
Wow.
And my parents made the choice not to actually tell me until the first time I had a crisis. I think I was in boarding school in England, and they couldn't work out what was wrong with me. So my mom was like, you know, sickle cell only happens to black people as well. So it's not something that anyone really knew about in England. So she was like, oh, tell them to test or check for this. And I was like, why would you do that when you already knew what it was? But I was lucky to not actually suffer from that much when I was younger. It actually affected me a lot more as I got into my teenage years. Yeah.
So at what age did she tell you?
I had my first crisis when I was 15.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll come back to that.
Me on the other hand, I started having crises at like 6 months. So it was like right off the bag. At first they thought it was leukemia, so they wanted to do a cut down and a lot of things, and then I think a doctor finally suggested why not test for sickle cell, and that was when they found out that I had sickle cell. And it was from there, primary school, I remember I always wrote my exams during holidays when everyone was at home, because when everyone was in school, I was on admission in the hospital. I had a lot of crises growing up. I was always in and out of the hospitals. I grew up with the whole stigma and everything, the yellow eyes, the tiny body, people looking at you, pitying you, not being able to play with your friends. You know, I was always the smallest and all of that. And it didn't help that I had a younger sister. She's AS, but she's like twice my size and everything. So it was very obvious that I had sickle cell. It wasn't something I could hide. Even teachers that know that you have sickle cell, they still use it to tease you in a way that make you feel weird. You know, they're like, if I touch you now, you could just faint.
Wow.
That kind of
they would
thing.
say that to your
they
face.
would say that to your face, you know. And it was it's not been an easy ride. Like anytime I talk about it, I always say it wasn't fun growing up with sickle cell, but I think it kind of made me stronger, and I'm glad I was able to build that confidence from a young age. So it hasn't really affected me much.
Okay. Were you treated differently growing up?
To be honest, I didn't know I had sickle cell for a very long time. I just knew, my mom didn't used to hit me as much. She's just like, timber bear kind of thing. So she used to just pamper me a bit. It was different. But then I think my first crisis that I was like, okay, now this is what they call sickle cell. I was in uni already.
Wow.
Like throughout secondary school, I don't remember being admitted for sickle cell crisis or anything. I never had that feeling. It was until I entered 100 level, and I'm like, bruh, he hit me like I was sick every month.
Like, when did you find out? When did she tell you?
I actually, my mom wasn't chanced to tell me because I lost her when I was 14. So there was no conversation around it. I remember when I was 8, my grandma was like, oh, she's always sick, let's take her to the hospital. And then the doctor said, oh, I had sickle cell. And my mom was like, God forbid, as if she did not know. Oh, no. She's like, never. My mom was not this man that was like, let's prophesy the good word of God. It's not my portion. So we didn't really have that discussion, to be honest. And when she died, and it just moved on, I just moved on from it. I was okay until uni. It was uni I had to face it's quite. I'm like, okay, you're an adult now, and this is your reality. So I think that was it.
Why do you think it's so hard for people to speak up about this? Is it pity?
It's the stigmatization.
I think there are different things. For me, the reason I made the decision not to tell people early on was starting out, not even here, but just generally as an actor. I made the decision that you don't want people to to not want to hire you because they might worry that you're going to fall sick in the middle of set and what's going to happen to the rest of the job. So you have to just, like, to me, I wanted to guard that that side of things, and it's not, to me, there's the pity, that's one thing. There's the other side, is just generally, it naturally affects people's behavior if it's something that they think can happen and that you have no control over.
Stigmatization wise, you said people don't speak up because of stigmatization. At points where you began to speak up, or you began to tell people that this is my reality, this is what I'm going through, were there any significant stigma episodes that you remember?
Yeah, definitely. I was telling her before we started the show, I think I started speaking out in 2017 or so, and I'm very vocal about it because I felt like there was no point. There are some people that talk about it, but they code some things, and I've had a lot of experiences. I've had 3 surgeries. I'm just 26. I've had a lot of things with sickle cell, so I just decided to come out full on and just show everything out there. And I've had brands say, oh, I don't think I can work with you because our ideologies don't align. They won't come out and tell you, oh, we don't like the fact that you're putting your life out there or you're talking about sickle cell. They'll just say it in like very grammatically correct terms, that they can't work with you. Or I've had relationships where boyfriends, their moms say, oh, I don't want my son to date someone who's SS. And I'm looking at her in my mind. I'm not saying anything, but in my mind, I'm like, this thing is not communicable. Your son is AA. What is going on? Do you understand? But it's just that stigma. It's just that, or you go for a job interview. I once had a job interview and I was sent for medicals. I didn't expect to get a call back. Because the minute they send you to do a medical test and it comes back that you have sickle cell, they're not going to call you. I've had that experience a lot. So I was even surprised when she called, I got the call. I was shocked when I got into the office and she started asking me, oh, so how often do you fall sick? Like in a year, how often do you fall sick? Like I have a calendar, like every year, January 1st, Jesus tells me, oh yeah, so this is the calendar of how you're going to fall sick this year. March will be free, but September you're going to be sick, baby. I'm staring at her and I'm like, I don't understand. It comes when it comes. Like you can't plan it. And she's like, oh, so how are we supposed to work this out? I'm like, okay, don't worry, I'll give you advance notice when I'm feeling it's coming. Because I don't know what you want from me. So there have been so many instances, and I get a lot of DMs from warriors as well. They're shocked with the way I talk about it, and they're like, they can't say it because, in fact, I know someone still messaged me recently. She's been in a long-term relationship. It's getting serious, but the guy doesn't know that she has sickle cell. What? And she's scared to death to tell him.
We'll still come back to that because I'm going to speak on that. But Adeolu,
I mean, stigma. Funny enough, I've had experiences in terms of not necessarily the stigma of having sickle cell, but I'm not SS, I'm SC, which is a different brand of sickle cell, right? And it affects you in different ways. And I don't necessarily have. I didn't used to have crisis as often. Then I had a point where I had a crisis a lot. When I moved to America, I remember I was having a crisis. I went to the hospital, and because I'm SC, I usually have a higher white blood cell count than people that have sickle cell. So when they tested my blood count, so my white blood cell count was high, the doctor effectively accused me of being a drug addict that just wanted to get hold of drugs. Wow. So they sent me back home. And I was still in so much pain.
Wow.
And so I had to then force my way to drive back to hospital later in huge amounts of pain and just hope it wasn't the same doctor.
But I feel we all need to learn more to be able to handle these situations better, especially doctors who we think they're professionals
I feel like
already.
It takes one to know. My current doctor now, because I don't stay in one hospital intentionally for too long, because I've noticed that over time, see finish, and then they start being very lax. They've come to know you. Even if you come in and you're screaming, they're like, Ibukunoluwa, they'll just leave you one side, and so that kind of. So I tend to try different places, but I have one place that I use, and her best friend was a warrior. She passed on. So she understands it. So there's this thing about doctors. They've seen a lot of things. When I had my surgery in Ibobi, in fact, a lot of people died while I was there. And they would come into the hospital like nothing happened. And you're asking them, what happened to that mama? Because they've seen so much. So they are not as sensitive as they need that training needs to be done, and that sensitization needs to really happen.
Yeah, and going back to the lady you said reached out to you that she was in a relationship and she was yet to tell her partner. What's it like single and living with sickle cell?
For me, I always put it out the first conversation. It was so bad because I had crisis like last week, and I was telling my doctor that the guy I was talking to, I told him, oh, what's your genotype? We were literally talking for the first time, and the guy is like, oh, I'm AA, or I think I'm AA. I'm like, you can't think, you have to know because I'm SS. The guy just put Jakpa. He literally wrote it, and I'm like, this did not just happen to me. So I was telling my doctor, I'm like, doctor, you won't, because myself and my doctor, we talk about everything, like everything is my guy. So I'm like, you won't believe what just happened to me. I was talking to a guy, and he was like, he told me Jakpa, like, him care. No, I'm like, my doctor was like, maybe you shouldn't have told him the first time. I'm like, it's better to say it now, so we'll not start catching feelings. So me, I'm a first. In fact, if I meet you the first time, the second time like this, I'm telling you, me, I'm SS, so don't stress me. If you're not on the same page, let's just be going.
So you think it's very important to bring it up very early in the relationship?
Yes,
very.
I sincerely agree with you guys. I feel like it's very important to bring up the genotype conversation very early in a relationship. It was on my very first date with my now husband that I actually asked him, Uncle, come here, what exactly is your genotype? It's very important. But finding love and living with sickle cell, Adeolu, you are married now. You've been married for how long?
6 months.
Great.
Yeah, 6 months.
Congrats.
Well, congratulations.
Honestly.
How did you find love?
Oh, man, wow.
Like you won an award.
Wow.
Bruh. Like.
So for me, how did I find love? I'll answer it outside of the sickle cell conversation, right? In terms of that, for me, my relationship with God was always very huge to that and how it was going to happen. We met at a wedding. It's funny, in terms of how you bring up this stuff, for me, it was very important because I always, like, usually if I was dating, talking to anyone, it'd be kind of one of the first things that would come up is try and find out what your genotype is. Though at the same time, I wouldn't try and let people know that I had sickle cell, but I would try and bring up the conversation generally. And my wife hadn't heard about it. So we got tested together. I was like, I'll get tested as well, don't worry. Like, I told her about it. And so we got tested together. Not knowing that, I was like, you cool. So it has to be AA, otherwise. But yeah, she was AA, and we've kind of gone through that process. Just before we got engaged, I had a relatively big crisis, and she was, very there, slept at the hospital, was very present. And for me, that was something, because that's something that I take into, it's so important.
Very, very important.
Because I know how stressful that must be, and that's why I had to came to my conversation that the person must be AA. Like, as much as you don't want to be like you're being inconsiderate, or we have to think about the future, because I know what it's like growing up being in hospital all the time and how much that must cost. And so it's a thought that we have to bring into our heads when we're getting married, about children going forward, having sickle cell, and having to be able to take care of it. And it was just important. It was a necessity for me.
So do you think it's easier because you are a guy? It's easier to find love?
I mean,
It's easier.
I would say that I don't remember any. The only cases that I've had, maybe if I was dating someone that also was a carry thing, I was like, we can't date. But I've never been in a situation where someone has been like, oh, because you have sickle cell, I can't talk to you. I've never experienced that personally. So
Lucky you.
Lucky you, girl. Like, seriously.
For women, it's harder.
us,
That's
it's
just the truth.
a different
Because
case.
when you think about the way our society is built, it's always the guy that introduces the lady to the woman. So men don't really have to think about their in-laws like that. You understand? Women, we have to consider how your husband's mother will feel, how his sisters will feel, how his community will feel.
About
You get, so you already have that, and then they're already thinking about the way you're looking like this, before you go and faint, any small thing, you cannot do housework, you cannot do house chores. Why will you be childbearing now? Do you get, there are lots of things to consider as a woman if you're SS.
So what are some of the triggers? Are there any triggers, like maybe the weather fluctuation in Nigeria? Are there triggers or things that
Yes.
Okay, you know what? Around May, my doctor told me, was like, do you know you're the 12th warrior to come into the hospital today? There was just this sudden change around like May, June, and it was like a trigger. During admission, like every room, the private ward was filled with warriors only. And I'm like, okay, something's not right. For me, my triggers are usually, it's not really weather or anything. Most times it's always mental stress and emotional stress for me, most times. And maybe if my physical trigger is not as bad as my mental and emotional triggers. So if I stress myself now, it won't happen immediately. Maybe it take like a month. It'll pile up, and then you get signs. Like me, when I start having like back pain, or my eyes start getting yellow, or I'm just like genuinely tired, and I already know that it's time to go and visit the hospital. So there's the impromptu one that you'll be fine. I have gone from party to hospital.
Wow. Straight.
Triggers. So for me, usually ends up either being physical stress or weather. And for me, when I moved back to Nigeria, I think it was weird because I've been living in cold countries. So why is it when I come here that the cold is what's triggering me? But I think it was the fluctuation in weather. So I'd be in the heat, going around Lagos, and you come home and I'm in air conditioning, and the air conditioning would often be what triggers me.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
There's usually that, or there was one time I decided to be joining everybody doing this Fit Farm something. Was this Lagos Lekki bridge behind us? I might as well have just run to the hospital because I was halfway down that bridge. That was the end. I was just keep running the rest of the way to the hospital.
Why? I don't even bother.
But is your diet the same as everyone's diet, or do you have like a special?
No, I eat anything now. I don't have any special diet.
No, not really special diet, but I feel like there are a couple of things. Like for me now, one thing I've come to
you stay off from.
Yes. I think when I was growing up, there was this myth about drinking ugu water. So my mom would wash
Have
ugu.
you taken ugu water?
See, they'll make it in kegs.
Keg like this. And my
But the
mom,
wrongest thing is that
there was no fact or
no, it's actually good for people that are not sickle cell because ugu actually has extreme high iron.
Exactly.
And iron is very, very bad for you.
us.
You get, but then they don't. They just said, ugu multiply
the blood. Yeah,
you'll be drinking gallons.
Growing up,
Meanwhile, you are doing yourself.
My mom would wash ugu and put it in my flask, and then she'll put another flask of malt and give me to drink. I would go to school and either drink the malt and throw away the ugu water, or come back and force myself to drink it like that.
You would actually finish it and your eyes just become yellow because you have excess iron in your blood.
Yeah,
I believe information is key, and we all need to be informed. Throughout this discussion, we've spoken about trips to the hospital. But we've not spoken about one key factor, because every time you go to the hospital, you are spending money. So let's talk about the financial implication of living with sickle cell disease.
I don't have words. You know, I said it on the video when I came out as being a warrior. I said, I'm low-key always broke because I spend literally at least 85% of my earnings in the hospital.
Wow.
And it's funny because I'm from a polygamous family, so my dad has a lot of things on his mind. So being the only one in my immediate family that is SS, you're like, everybody's tired. There was a time when I was younger, people used to come and they'll sleep with me in the hospital. They'll be like, where's in the hospital? Let's pack food, pack fruits. Now,
then to get to a point
in fact,
where they'll just
I'll be in the hospital for 1 week. They don't know that I'm not at home. And I'm the one paying my bills. I'm the one doing all these things. It's not when it has gotten to here. I now call my dad. I'm like, Dad, I've been in the hospital for 1 month and the bill is 2280. He's like, for what? Nibo, tell them we'll pay half. And I'm just like, thank God I've used this hospital for 20 years. If not, I don't know what will become of me. And the funniest thing was when I was really ill in December 2018, and I had to be transferred to Lasut. To get a bed space in the ICU, I had to pay 500,000 naira, like $500,000 naira, just for them to give you a bed in the ICU. And I was in the ambulance, literally battling for my life. And they're like, 500K or nothing. That was it. So we had to, like, my brother-in-law, everybody was just jamming it together, going to the ATM to withdraw 500K. By the time I was done, my bill when I was leaving was like 870K. Minus all the drugs. They said, please go and buy blood, go and do this. So like almost $1 million naira for one episode of crisis. And I've had several. And I have several in a year. So just imagine how much.
But is it the same everywhere in the world? You've been to the UK, you've been to America. Was it the same case over there, or are there provisions?
I think there's a lot to take. Like, I've been very blessed and lucky. So up until the fact that I got on my own HMO plan, I was covered by my parents, which was important because the cost of this is it's astounding here. And let's not pretend about it any. But the thing is that I think that we have to like improve government healthcare is a necessity, because like you said, we are somewhat in blessed circumstances, but think about people that are incredibly poor and can't afford it. And these honestly are the people that lack the education to avoid having children that have sickle cell, and they have multiple children and are going through this, and until the government stance on it or quality on it is improved, you don't, where are we going with them? Because the cost of it is astounding. And even from the experiences that I've had abroad, in England, luckily, because I'm British, there's also the NHS, which is helpful. Yeah. But I had negative experiences there as well. I had I had a blood clot from crisis in my eye, which burst and caused me to lose my vision in my eye. Wow. And then when I had the surgery, because you're doing it on the NHS, and they have so many people, there were flaws from the surgery that caused me to lose my vision for for a sustained amount of time. I lost my vision in my eye for about 6 months.
Wow.
And then because of that, I decided any other further surgeries that I now needed to do on my eye, I didn't want to do it on the NHS. I wanted to go. So I went to America. Privately. And, from experiences I've had, just going to the hospital, ambulance alone is like $6,000. Don't minimize the cost of everything in America, because they do not have government provided healthcare and all those kind of things. It is expensive.
When I was in the UK too, I was in the ICU, and then I was just looking. The white doctors were just jamming their eyes together, and luckily I just looked at the guys. A black guy came in, and I looked at his band, and I saw Igbo name. I'm like, my brother, this is what is. My friends were just like, uncle, please, she's SS. That's the thing that's wrong with her. And immediately there was solution. Wow. So when I was in the UK, the only best thing was that I was a student, so my healthcare was covered by my school fees and everything. So ambulance and everything was instant. Healthcare there is on point when it comes to that. If you're a student and you're covered.
Are there foundations that support financially? You don't know?
I know about SCAF. Wow. So SCAF is, I think they're based in Abuja, and they kind of help out with I'm not sure about money, but they help out with medications. And I think this year they've asked for a lot of donations, and they're trying to work with other smaller foundations to see how they can spread the funds and all of that. But when it comes to that financial aid, we honestly really need it. I was going to mention HMOs in Nigeria. Honestly, they can be helpful, but sometimes they shy away from doing some things, especially when they know that the patient in concern has sickle cell. I've heard them say on the phone sometimes to my hospital, they'll say, we can't cover this one this time, or we can't give her this kind of drug, bring it down. Is there a cheaper version of this drug? I remember, in fact, there was an HMO that refused to pay for my surgery. Wow. And they're like this, and they kept insisting that it is under plastic, that the surgery I was going to do is under plastic. And I'm like, what is fun or plastic about what I'm about to do? You're about to cut skin from my thigh to cover an ulcer, and you're telling me it's plastic surgery. How is this plastic surgery? Plastic surgery, I'm not changing my face, I'm not giving myself a smaller nose, I'm not adding boobs or anything. I'm trying to, this is like life-saving stuff. So there really needs to be like regulations and things, and really put this thing in place. And also that financial aid is very important, because I get this year alone, this corona period alone, I've raised funds for a lot of warriors that I know. I'm always putting on my status, please, who can help? I think this period I've raised almost like 200K. I have a warrior friend who's about to have surgery in lawsuit. She's about to have hip replacement. We raised 3 million naira for her this period. I am always raising money. It worries me a lot, because I feel like sometimes people might feel like I'm just trying to scam them, but it's my reality. My DMs are full daily. I need to buy drugs. I'm in pain. I need to go to the hospital. I can't ignore these messages. I've put myself in that position where I can't ignore messages like that anymore. So I have to find, if it doesn't come out of my pocket, I have to ask people, please help me for the sake of God.
So on a final note, what do you want people to take away from this conversation?
Stop being so judgmental. Like, if I don't tell you, I've had several times I'm like, they're like, oh, you don't look it. I get that you don't look it a lot, because rarely do you find excess of my stature. You get so you're like, it's not don't. As much as you want to pity me, the same time, just rile it in a bit. You get, just chill. And I just want people to be more open-minded. You get, it's not as it's bad, but it's not as bad as you think. You get, it's important for you to educate yourself, because when I did that video, people were like, thank you for telling me this. I didn't know this is what sickle cell warriors go through. I don't know the pain is this much. I just used to think it was just a form of genotype that is just there. You have headaches and you have malaria once in a while. I didn't know it was this severe. You get? So just educate yourself. It won't take you anything. Go to Google or watch videos. There are plenty on YouTube. You get? Just educate yourself. That's just it.
Yeah. I think for me, on the other hand, it's more because she said for the public. For me, on the other hand, I think I want to talk to warriors. Like, being a warrior is not a crime. It's not something we chose. It's not a death sentence.
Exactly.
Because I get so many DMs saying, "Oh, I don't know how to come out and say it." You're not. You're not a mistake. Would I say it like that? God didn't create you by mistake. It wasn't by accident. There's a reason for it, and it's not your fault. It's not communicable. There's nothing wrong with you. Like she said, if I don't open my mouth and tell you that I have sickle cell, except I'm sick and my eyes are yellow, you can't guess. You know, so I want everyone to be confident in themselves. That confidence is needed because they're so down, they're hiding, they're keeping quiet, and I feel like that hiding and keeping quiet is one of the things that has set us back a bit because people don't know. I always ask myself, if I have a crisis in an environment where maybe I have people around, but they don't know who I am, they don't know what I am, what happens if I'm not capable to say, oh, this is what is wrong with me? Because that 5 seconds you're going to save is very important. So telling people and coming out and accepting who you are is very key.
Thank you.
For me, I think it boils down to the education aspect of it. You know, from what I know, Lagos has the highest ratio of people living with sickle cell. You look, the percentage of people living with this, and also just the sheer number of people in Lagos states. And it boils down to education, because we need to be able to have these conversations more openly and honestly. People understand the impact of what your genotype is. It comes down to things like even sex education, because a lot of it comes down to people having sex, not knowing the genotype of the person they're having sex with, not knowing their own genotype, and then you're raising children and you have to be financially prepared. You have to, if you're not financially equipped, at least also know where you can go. And a lot of that is down to the government as well. But I know the government are also making efforts to increase the amount of sickle cell centers there are in the state. But I think that people need to know their genotype. It's essential. So one of the things I'll tell people to do is to test themselves, find out their genotype.
Thank you so much, warriors, for sharing your story. It was really insightful. Thank you. And thank you for watching. Do join the conversation in the comment section below. I do hope you learned a lot, and remember to follow us on our social media platforms. I'll see you in the next episode.